Bonjour à tous.
Hello everyone, Benjamin Sepp, CyberDay France. I'm Chief Defense Officer at CyberDay France. We're very happy to welcome you here at this round table. We are going to discuss ransomwares. This is an extremely pregnant topic in 2023. We're also going to start to speak how not to worsen a crisis when you are facing this type of attack. And with us today we have three speakers. We have Stéphane Molliard from the AFNOR, who is in charge of Consumer Department, Agro, Digital, Health and Sport. That's lots of departments. And also and leisure also. And you are also the director of the IA Artificial Intelligence Great Challenge, and you were consultant for strategy and operational at Deloitte. To my Guillaume Biancarelli, who is the Vice DG at Reza Ash, who will present us what it is and represents more local authorities, the public sector and health around this roundtable. David Ligo, who is in charge for crisis and remediation at Orange France. We're going to try to discuss crisis management, incident response, and maybe conclude on a certain number of tips in order to avoid these kind of situations. Let's start with Stéphane. You are here, you have two hats here today. One, you are a witness as a victim in a certain way of having been victim of a ransomware attack in February 2021. And the second part of this round table, as an actor also, what you can do based on this type of attack. And first of all, if you could quickly introduce us who the AFNOR is and how did it happen? How did it start in February 2021, that attack? Thank you for having invited me to this round table. So the AFNOR, for those who don't know me, we are the French standard organizations. We are in charge of elaboration of norms with the companies in co-building, co-design. I just remind you that norms are standards, referentials, contrary to regulations that are legal documents. And these documents are made in partnership together with the companies in order to provide regulation to the markets according to a certain number of topics. So that was the easiest. So regarding the cyber attack, which we have been a victim of, and here I'm going to testify under this, it was a moment that everyone would like to never have to go through. It happened in February 2021, 1 year after the COVID. So we had lots of things on our plate: COVID, cyber attack. I don't know, where we were kind of thinking, okay, what's next? And so it arrived in February. We were hit by a ransomware attack in the new version of Ryuk. Back then it was the newest version that has really affected our operations and has shut us out of our information system for numerous months, which was a big problem with us. So there's always two dimensions in a cyber attack. First of all, it's the information system. It's how to rebuild from the attack and how you ensure that you have really eliminated the risk and that you're not exposed to a next cyber attack. And the second is, how can we do it at the trade level? That is my part. How can we continue the activity despite the absence of an information system, which is the key of each company, and try to find degraded mode, ways of working in degraded mode to preserve what can be preserved, and of course is to continue to make money, because of course a company that spends money but does not earn any money, that is going to run into a certain number of problems after a certain while. So we were confronted with this situation. Yes, of course, with tools that allowed us to identify very quickly that we had been attacked. We immediately cut the SI we gapped them, but no air gap, but no SI, no internal external communication, no workspaces for our co-workers, no more network connection within the company. So each collaborator had to stay at home. So there was a second lockdown after the COVID lockdown, and it forced us in a very short delay, 3 weeks, to work with tools that were internal tools, personal tools, your own computer, your own internet connection, in order to try to mitigate the situation. And then step by step, we switched over to alternative tools in order to compensate this absence of this information system that progressively went back online according to our priorities in the different trades in our group. AFNOR, we work in normalization, so we do certification. We also do training. So a number of trades with different limitation and objectives that are different, and everyone wants to basically get your information system back online as fast as possible. And everyone is saying, me first, me first. So there was it's for this reason, based on this sad experience, that we said, okay, based on our trade and what we have known, it would be maybe good if we could share much wider with the wider community the best practices, what we have developed during this sad period. That's why we started working with partners like Orange Cyberdéfense in order to see how could we build a document around this sad experience. Thank you, David. The ransomware attacks, this is something you live every day. Who is concerned by that? Sadly, it concerns everyone, any company. I mean, if you look at the media, every week we have new victims that are basically showing up. Concerns companies, SMEs, big groups, smaller companies, all type of victims. It concerns the private sector, the public sector. It is a fairly visible attack, and the impacts are fairly dramatic. If you talk about local authorities or health, that is something that is visible, and that is a very strong impact on the life of a company. So sadly, it's going to concern all types of companies. Sadly, it's not the only risk. There's also scams, there's mail attacks, but this is a ransomware attack is really the one that goes furthest. It can even all the way go to endanger the survival of the company. So that's why these are things that we have to deal with every day at Orange Cyberdéfense. It is really one of the major threats. We have different attacks, but the malware and the ransomware through the hijacking of credentials that allows you to give you access. This is clearly the most impacting threat, and I think that in the head of the managers, this is clearly something that is being talked about both. The attackers basically do pretty much everything same. They have the same operational mode, being at AFNOR or in local authority in a hospital. Yeah, it's technology, the mechanism, the tactics change, but so malicious codes, they evolve, but the ways, the phishing attacks, intrusion, privilege elevation, double extortion, data theft, and of course the encrypting that basically forces the company to pay up a ransom. All these are techniques that are fairly common, even if they change in their threat of evolution, but it's that is the recurring aspect for the past 2 years. In complement, do you sometimes have attackers that target more and more the organization? Are there categories of types of attack? Are there attacks like ransomware attacks that happens pretty much everywhere. Are there specific attacks that are more targeted on companies? Yes, of course, there is. Yes, there's the ransomware, and of course, for other categories of actors, there's maybe OEA or interesting actors for state-side attacks. We can also have supply chain notions. It's the small, you attack the small stakeholder, then that allows you to climb up all the way to the biggest one. And then you have, of course, cyber criminality, and you have state-sponsored crime with specific actors that are regulated, like with the NIS2 directive. Then these actors are going to try and target specific attacks. So, Guillaume, you represent the RESA. What do your members of the RESA network say, be they in the public authorities, or how do they prepare themselves to these new menaces? Thank you for the invitation, and we accept with pleasure, because Orange Cyberdéfense is one of our workers, and we have two missions. One is we mutualize, we buy for our members, and we provide them with markets, and we have another mission of training and professionalization. So we accompany the professionalization of public actors. We have members who are historically from the health sector, mainly public, but also private, medical, social actors, people for elderly care or handicapped people care, and more local authorities, whoever they are, the regions, cities, conurbations, etc. All this together, it's 2,000 members, of which 700 suppliers. It's a yearly buying volume of 2 billion euros. So our role is to kind of particular role in the public sector, and the idea is to try to restitute what we've seen. So we do kind of a market watch. We touch all the different supply fields, from drugs to works and digital sales, and of course the telecom information system. It's our second biggest position. It's about 300 million euros. It's second after drugs. So when we look at this, when we look at the needs that we see emerge with our members, I have to keep it brief because we have a very big diversity of members. We're in the public health sector, which is extremely fragmented. Small structures, big structures, we have all that together. We have different levels of maturity, but mutualization logics that are being set up. So but the need approach is pretty much the same, even though the maturity of the actors it's very diverse. So we have a form of focalization on specific needs, on acquisition of licenses or products, which I would qualify as being basic in the hospitals, for instance. We have a huge gap to fill, so you have to. It's a very basic approach. So we have this heterogeneity, this variation in maturity and convergence towards needs that are similar. We have slowly a awareness that is coming up. We have very emblematic cases of hospitals that have been attacked, and the risk is so big that it's so urgent to act. And despite this awareness, the actions seem in a certain way, they seem very not proportional based on the risk. I mean, think about it, a public hospital that is being blocked by a ransomware attack, that is fairly impressive experience, a fairly dangerous experience. So what we are trying to see is recently coordinated actions between the victims to act, because the first thing, I mean, people are aware, but then resources, financial resources, human resources need to be provided in the hospitals. The state had started to act in 2019, and then there was the French Relance plan with a cybersecurity aspect, 135 million euros injected in order to act on these topics, and I'll probably get back to on that. But for instance, RESA has worked together with Orange Cyberdéfense in order to animate and participate in the animation of this program that was aiming for two things. One, to create a cyber security pathway curricula that would basically create a a form of awareness and security culture training, and starting 2022, a system to acquire licenses, and there's big territorial groupings in France, and there are a certain number of challenges that bring many hospitals together. So there was the challenges of mutualizing things for supplies, for information systems, but we haven't reached that yet, that harmonization level, and the harmonization of the digital aspect in the public health sector. And that allowed us to have mutualized acquisition system. So here we have, this is the big needs that we start to imagine. And for the local authorities, the conurbations, city halls, the major cities, is there an awareness, or there's still lots to be done to get people to work, to understand that the need for that security? We have a fairly developed, we're fairly much focused on hospitals. We have less visibility on local authorities, but yes, we are. There's a strong growth, especially on the territorial markets, and on all the regional council, the intercommunalities, conurbations, city conurbations, and of course the conseils départementaux, the local councils. So we have more than 60 local councils use. So we have a certain number, a wide number, 350 members, based on the 2,000 that we have, that use the cybersecurity aspect, with a strong growth since 2019. And we've really seen a post-COVID. I mean, it's clear people come to us and ask us, and it's post-COVID. And during the COVID, that the ransomwares have really exploded in France and everywhere else in the world. So now I'm giving back the word to Stéphane. Yes, in 2021, you've lived through this cyber crisis, but at the same time, you're not a random actor. You are an ETI. You are not a huge company, AFNOR. You're a smaller group, so you've really taken that head on, and it's given you an idea. Could you maybe explain to us the idea that you had? Yes, absolutely. It gave us an idea, in order to having done it numerous times as a standard bearer, is to share our experience in order to get as many people together and prevent and improve the resilience to a cyber attack. And we have started talking about this among us, and around a fairly large network, especially with Orange Cyberdéfense, but there's other actors that have participated in this initiative, to see how we could co-build a document that would be basically a compendium of all the best practices linked to cyber resilience. How do you prepare and recover from a cyber attack, either as solutions provider or as a victim of a cyber attack, and the organization that be touched by this, so that they could at least reduce the consequences of a cyber attack of this nature, which is why we have collectively launched this initiative. We decided to take a kind of AFNOR spec. It's a reference document. It's not a standard, does not contain any requirements, but it recommends best practices in a very short time, because there was an urgency with, of course, the growth of ransomware, as Benjamin explained it. There was a necessity to produce a document that we could be able to share with the community very quickly, and that is why we have chosen the tool AFNOR specifications, and that is how we launched the work on a document that's called Cyber Resilience, Rebuilding Your Information System and Continuing Your Activity in Case of Paralyzing Cyber Attack. And the code name is AFNOR Specifications 2208. Should you be interested, if you haven't downloaded it, it's free. You can download it from the AFNOR website. And it's today we have about 7,000 downloads within 3 months. So it's a document that that is extremely has met its audience, and it's been has found its interest. So as you said, the AFNOR, this is the most downloaded document from the AFNOR website to date. It's of course, in terms of AFNOR specification, it's the one most we could, of course, talk about the norms that everyone knows, the ISO 9901 on the quality management, but on the specific AFNOR specification, this is the most downloaded document, which shows that there was a need for this, and that this document was something people expected from the ecosystem and on the market in order to prepare to these cyber attacks and recover from them. So, David, this has started over a year ago at FIC, actually, where AFNOR came to meet us and ask us if we could take the lead of this work group. I think in this document there's two parts. What is the technical answer you can provide when you're faced with this type of attack? What do I start with? Where do I start? Should I reinstall each workstations or not? Or which ones first? That is the part you've been taking the lead on. And the second part is basically fills a gap. I think there's not much documents that have been identified on how do you work without an information system? How do you survive in the work information? That is very complex to answer that. And we've tried to get that going in the work group. So there was 30 people working, 50 in the working group, 50 people working in the group that participated on this work group. There was a certain number of actors from the cybersecurity, also representatives from the public sector, institutional actors, major companies that have participated very actively in this document. So what's in this document? What do you need to learn? What should you take home in a couple of words? Okay, that's a big challenge. It's going to be very not easy to summarize 80 pages, but there's two main chapters. How they continue your activity in degraded mode without use information system. How do you get organized? How do you manage the relation with the suppliers, with the customers in order to ensure operational continuity of the company. We had a first part as, of course, the crisis management in the early days. There's some dimensions, the legal dimension, the human dimension, that is something that's very often overlooked. The difficulty of managing the crisis, managing the impact of the crisis, it's a marathon. You're running a marathon, but at the speed of a sprint. So you need to hold out. The teams will be very solicited, high tension. So you have a risk of tension, of burnouts in the teams, of different elements, of people dropping off. So we really try to get all the dimension, the insurance dimension. So there's a first part around how do we manage the organization, the strategy globally, what is the priority, how do we organize at team level. There's two main parts, how to continue the activity, and I worked more on how to rebuild the information system. That is an element that is not often mentioned in other standard documents. So we try to list all the choices that need to be taken, all the issues that need to be tackled, because of course after the cyber attack, it's just like if you had a bulldozer that has went through the data center, nothing is left, and you need to rebuild. The question is, of course, what is the state of play of the elements, how have the visions, what remains, what are the servers that can still be used, do we have backups that we can fall upon to, is it the company who's hit or just the information system? So there's this entire aspect that's a huge topic, the digital investigation, the interest, and it's not always very well known to understand what happened. What was data stolen? What did the attack do exactly? Is things just locked down? So we need to anticipate what the issues are and how we can rebuild for this to be more resilient and to avoid that the attacker can basically then get back in and relaunch its attack. So all the topics around rebuilding, how do we rebuild based on the backups? When do I wait for the investigation results, or do I decide to take a reasonable step back in order to avoid a a lack of data loss. If the attacker is, can I accept to lose 15 days of data, so I can go back to another data and I try to find all the traces of malware or the backdoors that the attacker might have left, or potentially opportunities. We have cases of clients that took advantage to go towards other solutions. Very often, as they choose another messaging system, very often people can't work without communication system, and the messaging system is of course one of the key systems. That could be the opportunity to evolve, to rebuild differently your messaging system in a more secured way. So this is what we try to do and see how we can get out of the crisis in terms of what do we learn from it and how do we get a new dynamic to avoid to being re-attacked again. And the surveillance is a key element. Very often that is through the new detection technologies at the workstation, the servers, at the peripheral, with a different security approach, so that we can establish a certain number of trust when we take up again, to ensure that we really eliminated the attacker from the inside. So the idea, the challenge is to rebuild quickly, but not on the same basis, but in a more safe way, and that takes time. And so, of course, surveillance is a useful element in order to manage all these elements. Yeah, that is not an easy topic, and based on the cyber expert, it's not always the same answer. So in the work group, I heard that there was lots of exchanges. Just to take one example, when you're facing a cyber attack, the forensic time is very often longer than the recovery time. So the rebuilding time, you can't wait the end of the forensic to rebuild. So you need to take decisions before you take up an overview of how the attacker came in. So sometimes you need to rebuild systems that have been attacked, and you can choose to wait, and you actually make the crisis worse when you wait, because during numerous weeks you will not be allowing access to this information system and stay frozen, or you rebuild by taking the risk of rebuilding compromised assets, but mitigate the risks with surveillance. It's not always possible. It's not always what the choice that is made, and I think all solutions have been mentioned, with the consequences in terms of risk and also in time necessary for reconstruction. As far as Reza is concerned, what are the lessons learned? How do you prepare? How do you prepare the institutions for which you work to prepare for quick recovery? I think the measures are very interesting, and we've been asked by our members to go within these. We did a cybersecurity document that is. We have a document that's downloadable. It's on the demand by members. So there's need to improve your knowledge on the topic, and I think now the awareness is there. So we work by sharing information, knowledge, skills, while we animate our network with the suppliers and with the members. We have a training center. We have a manual. We have a certain number of publications. We have an online newsletter on security. So, and then via markets that we act. Of course, what is interesting, it's our members who act. And what is interesting is to see what they actually buy. When we look at the analysis of our cybersecurity markets, we have end-to-end solution. That was one of the demands of our members in the sourcing phases and linking with the suppliers, where we try to understand what the needs are. We need to provide products, integration, but also audit, advice, training. So there's all this in our markets, and when we do the analysis of the consumption, 90% of the supply deal with the core, the product, and the integrated associated integration. Even though it's important to do audit and counseling, it's important that the action is never the fundamental key. And another way of analysis is when we look at what is highly consumed. It was very much influenced by Franz Reuss, because we had to file a financing request. So we see it's that securing the messaging system, authentication systems, on EDRs, on systems, everything that was open to France Relance financing. Has a positive and a negative aspect. Positive because it gave an impulsion, but you had to wait for this funding to be available for people to decide to take up these initiatives. So you feel that people are now aware, but in a market that I find that still could grow, that could have gain in maturity. Yes, we were speaking about this when we were preparing. There's a number of demands of advice, of coaching, of training in crisis management, and we can see that this guide is there as a Bible. This just happened. What should I do? And I think it's really a key document to refer to. But there's also lots of solutions to avoid being hit, and so we're talking about surveillance. We're talking about we've also integrated surveillance tools in your market, and for the local authorities and for the health. I mean, the myth of total prevention. I hope that now nobody believes in this anymore. At one moment, you need to say it's not will I be hit, but when will I be hit? So you need to have incidents and avoid the crisis. I think this could be the conclusions of this roundtable. We've seen that whatever the structures, big or small, ransomware attacks continue to proliferate, and today the major groups, they take actions against it, but there's still many public companies and public institutions that are not protected. And we've seen that now we have a technical manual that is the most downloaded from the AFNOR website, and that basically lists the different recovery pathways by putting on one hand the risks and the speed at which this recovery restoration of the information system should happen. And there are solutions in the public sector in order to go quickly in learning how to react in the crisis, but also in how to recover from it. I think the entire cybersecurity is represented in the RESA market. And before you wait, while you're waiting for the recovery after the crisis, it's good to anticipate and accept the fact that there can be intrusions, but it should not become a crisis, and it could be just a incident management. And maybe in 10 years down the road, this will be part of our daily activities. Thank you to all of you. I think there is a microphone for any questions, should you have questions. If there's questions. Yes, hello. This is a question for Orange. I think you also have remediation offers in case of urgency. We can call you. And a form of insurance. Yes, we have a insurance portfolio. David represents the crisis and remediation service at Orange Cyber Defense. You can call us up to help answering a ransomware attack and other attack typologies, as we mentioned. And then we offer surveillance systems to avoid this kind of these incidents. The idea is so that they do not become crises. Thank you to all of you. There was still one. I had one question for the person from AFNOR. During the moment when the attack was detected and the complete remediation, how much time spent? I think it took us 2 or 3 months for full remediation. And you started back from backups. Yes, I forgot to say that. Yes, luckily the backups were not touched, but we restarted from the back. But before we launched the backups, we had to do the forensic to ensure that there was nothing malware left behind, and that took us between 2 and 3 months, with of course priorities and based on the different trades. But yes, it takes a certain There's faster ways. That's why we've done this guide. You need to find the proper compromise between rebuilding the information system and the obligations and the trade limitations, because everyone, of course, wants to be the first one back on deck. But at one moment, you need to look at the cost that is growing according to the length of the crisis. It can be, of course, reconciled with the loss of activity. Sorry, we have the spotlights shining, so we don't see. If there's a question, please raise your hand. Concretely, how do you work without information system with your customers, your suppliers, your co-workers? How do you communicate? That's the first days were very complex. We used the private addresses of the co-workers because we had back in the COVID times we had an alert system, so we had all the private information of all our co-workers. That's where we could so of course we need to ask for permission, and that was fairly fluid. All the teams were very very motivated in that. And then you need to rebuild something alternative. So we haven't got more phones, so we go with the outside suppliers. We have no messaging system, so we create another external messaging system. We set up a communication system. That's how we switched to Slack, for instance. So it's all these small alternative tools that allow us to conserve a link, because that is fundamental. And then you have specific application tools when you need to pay a supplier. Well, you pay with a checkbook rather than a bank transfer. Same thing for pay, where we had to do the pay slips. Because that is, if you don't pay your co-workers, it could have been a problem. So we had to find solutions, and it's really in the crisis that we see if we are reactive or not. I think you have to be very pragmatic based on the situation, and then you need to learn. You need to draw the lessons from what happened. That is something we have not had time to speak. You need to learn. You need to do feedback, and try to feed into everything we have. Everything that is good, because you're never safe from a new attack. That is always the inexorable.
Oui. Bonjour.
Hello. I had a question. Were you prepared, or at least a bit prepared, for these type of attacks? Was there a security committee, or not at all? Yes, some things had been prepared, because we had worked a couple of years ago on activity continuity plans. It's the famous norm 22301. It's the activity continuity plan. So there's certain number of things that were already down the pipeline. There were crisis teams that had been identified. Again, all this has been defined, but then we had to test it in real-time. You can build up plans, you can think about them, but then you need to implement them, and that's the most complicated. That's why you need to be helped by external experts, by people who are not necessarily at the heart of the tempest. Because when we are in the middle of the storm, you can't really take a step back. So you need maybe someone from outside that can. And cyber insurance, were they there? Yes. We had a general manager who had anticipated this, who had taken up a cyber insurance. That was a good idea, and they helped us, particularly the supplying of experts and in the recovery phase. We had also other contracts with other partners Maybe the insurance part is maybe something you kind of overlook in the daily life. Say, oh, it's very expensive. And the day it happens, you're quite happy to have them. Someone at your side who is going to compensate for a certain number of losses.